Thanks everyone for joining. I know it's late in the UK, so I totally appreciate that. And we had a fantastic set of talks so far. And as I was listening to all the speakers, I was thinking, we can add some identity here, we can add some identity there. It's all .NET, so why not? Thanks for all the presentations. And hopefully after this session, you walk out knowing how to add authentication and authorization and how you can use identity in your own systems. I usually do this talk with my partner in crime, JP, but we are off this week, and I let him off the hook. I was like, dude, don't join. I'll take it on. We'll have other opportunities to speak to you. So if you like what you see today, and if you want to learn more about identity, make sure to join our stream, the 4 to 5 show every Monday and Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific. Oh, no, 4 p.m. GMT, 8 a.m. Pacific. I operate on multiple time zones. And we talk about identity and anything that you can build with identity. JavaScript, Node, Kotlin. We did a Kotlin session the other day with some people from JetBrains. We did Rider. Anything that you like, everything that you find interesting around identity, just join us in the show, let us know, and we'll fix it. So before I kill you with slides, I don't want to do slides. I want to do a demo. I will very, very quickly switch to my console. And from here, I'm going to say make here. Can everybody see that okay in terms of the?
Yep.
Okay. So .NET new web app, and then we'll add some auth single log. That means I'm authenticating against Azure AD. Somebody says they're seeing nothing. Is that the case? Can everybody see?
I can.
I can see it. It's
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So it's not any problem. I'll see it fine. Okay. Thank you. And with that, I'm using the .NET template. Somebody says they're only seeing the mouse pointer. Oh, it's Cliff. Interesting. And I just created a web app that uses authentication. So if I open code, let's see if that works. So in code, we have the appropriate libraries. So if I jump into my CS Proj, there is the Microsoft Identity.web, which is our newest authentication library for .NET. There is one for the web, which does all the back and forth. There is the web UI that wraps the login, logout pages for your app. And then in the code, it literally takes 2 lines of code, which I can also reduce to 1 line of code by saying add Microsoft Web App Authentication, passing the configuration in there. And this is literally all I need to do to add authentication to my .NET Core app. I don't know if any of you have ever done authentication. And I know it's not a sexy subject. I know it's not a fun subject, but if you had to do OpenID Connect, if you had to work with JOT tokens, if you had to configure speaking to other services, then you know that there is a lot of code that needs to go. Lots of boilerplate code that most people don't really understand. And once you get into the weeds, then it becomes super complex. So what we did with Microsoft Identity.web was take all that complexity, take all those lines of code, and reduce them to a single line. So if I were doing an API, I would literally just do add Microsoft Web API Authentication, ignore the controllers and the pages here. This would literally allow the middleware, as the incoming calls come in, to take the token, validate it against Azure AD or Azure AD B2C, and allow the authentication authorization to take place. And then you tap into the existing ASP.NET identity. So you have the authorize attributes for the controllers or your actions, and it takes care of everything. I love this library. It's probably the best thing I've ever used in my life. And I'm not saying that because I work for identity, but having dealt with identity over the years, Auth0 prior to working with Microsoft, then Azure AD, and in fact, last week, I think it was Friday, I got flagged by Microsoft IT because I had a 3-year-old GitHub repo somewhere sitting with some Azure AD configured .NET Core app. It was using .NET Core 2 early days, and I configured that to use Azure AD at some point for one customer. Couldn't remember, but I left the secret for that app. So the team flags me and says, you left the app secret in your configuration. So if I switch to my app settings, here, usually there's a client secret, And this is the one that allows the application to actually communicate with Azure AD. So that should be another GUI. So I panicked. I went there. I looked at that. The secret was not used by anything. Please don't check in your secrets. I have a whole session about how to create secretless apps. But I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's a 3-year-old app. How long it will take me to upgrade to .NET 5 with Microsoft Identity.web? And in fact, we're going to stream that over the next coming days, because I wiped out hundreds of lines of code and I replaced them with a single line of code. And I spent more time fixing my JSON issues rather than fixing my identity. So if you haven't used this library, make sure you jump on the bandwagon. It supports 3.1 and .NET 5. And with that, I will leave you at the one-liner cliffhanger, and I will switch to my boring slides. Just to give a little bit of an explanation for people that have never used Microsoft Identity before and they don't know what it is. It is in effect a way to do two things. One is to authenticate users. So if you're creating a web app that your company is going to use, or if you're building a Walmart solution that you want your customers to come in and buy stuff, or Safeway or Costco, whatever you want to think of it, there's an enterprise version and there's a consumer version. So if you're building a mobile app with Xamarin and you want to authenticate your users, then you can use Azure AD B2C. If you're building an enterprise solution that your organizational users are going to use, you can use Azure AD. And then there's this kind of element that we don't really talk about much, which is all about securing your apps from building and developing locally all the way to production. So let's say you don't have to authenticate users, but you have to deploy your solution securely to Azure. Now you don't have secrets there. How do you configure secretless? Well, managed identity, which is backed by the Microsoft Identity Platform, and things like service principals allow you to develop locally against a production system without really having secrets to your databases, your storage keys, or whatever, and then deploy that exact same code and run in production without changing a single line of code. Again, leveraging the Microsoft Identity Platform. So people are like, oh, that's lovely. How do I get started? Well, we want you to come as you are. We work with every platform and every language. So it's not just .NET, although we honor .NET. And if you're running .NET on Azure with Visual Studio, then that's the ideal scenario. But the next slide tends to shock people sometimes because I have nothing about Microsoft here. This is all external stuff. In fact, we've done AWS streams. We're going to be doing streams with Google. So running your apps on Lambda and authenticating against Azure AD, that's perfect. Once AWS comes back up again, you can run on Bitbucket. We're working with the IntelliJ team to add Azure AD authentication there as well. We support all the platforms and all the languages. So our show is so much fun because we can build anything we want on any platform, and it's just fun to see how these things work. And you can run anywhere: serverless, Kubernetes, on-prem, containers, IoT devices. We're planning on a few sessions where we're going to be sticking Azure Identity on Raspberry Pis and trying to see how things work. And I did a blog post the other day where I was authenticating Firebase users with Azure AD in the backend. We are everywhere. But if you are actually using the Microsoft platform, then you get the best of both worlds. You get the security for your users and you get the security for your developers. So as a developer, I don't really need to know how to connect to my Azure database or my storage. I'm using Managed Identity out of the box. I can run using my local Visual Studio account if I'm logged into that and I have the right permissions. And then I can build for all these other services that are supported and lifted by the Microsoft Identity Platform. So one way or another, you're using the Microsoft Identity Platform. It's a super scalable solution. If you are using the enterprise version, if you're using Azure AD, we do 30 billion authentications per day. But you don't have to be a 30 billion authentication company. You can have one user logging in every day, and then you can have 10,000 users or 100,000 users on the same platform without you having to worry about how is my authentication handled. And then the same for B2C. You get 50,000 logins for free per month. So you can log in as many users as you want. And if you hit 50,000 users on your platform, then that's a good problem to have. Now you can start paying a few pennies for the extra logins. So we scale with your system. I love this slide because, as you can see, we wiped out so many lines of code in the Midwest. And then Bob wishes that he was as good as Marsha there. And we allow you to do that with the Microsoft Identity Web. I'm not going to go into the details here, but the old way of doing things has been transformed with a new library. And because you're .NET developers, I assume that you're mostly looking at the latest and greatest. Although if you're still running WinForms, web forms, MVC, WPF, all these solutions are supported by the platform. It just takes a little bit more code to do it, but things are evolving. We made MSAL a lot more straightforward. Another thing I wanted to highlight here, and I don't know how much time I have left, is that there are currently two versions of our building libraries. We have the ADAL and MSAL. ADAL is actually been deprecated as of June 30th, 2022. So you have a year and a half to start your migration. If you have any question, about how do I migrate, what do I need to do, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to us on the show. I will add our contact details in the chat as well, so you can reach out to us on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere you want, and we'll be more than happy to help you. So just be aware that ADAL is going away, and we know a lot of companies have some legacy, in quote, software that still uses all the libraries. We love working with Microsoft Identity Web, but I did say that, the old way of doing things is still there. You can still tap into the individual JWT token middleware to raise custom events. There is still the ability to customize the UI. There's still the ability to customize anything in the middleware. But if you don't care about these things, if you don't want to know about OAuth, or if you don't want to care about OpenID Connect, I don't want you spending 3 weeks learning these things. I want you to add one line of code, connect to your Azure AD or BTC, and move on happily to your next task. Because we know identity is like item 5 of your 200 item list, and having developers trying to understand how identity works, it's probably not something that is worth it. If you want to learn about these things, more than happy to point you to the right resources. But from my perspective, it's a dream come true being able to point people to a library or a sample and say that just copy these 5 lines of code or 2 lines of code and off you go. And we take care of your, we did the sample with Matt Ellis from JetBrains. I don't know if you ever come across Matt. He's a fantastic developer. He's a fantastic dev advocate. He came on the show with us to build a Kotlin web app with IntelliJ, and because there's an MSAL for Java library, but we wanted to add the web middleware. It turns out that we had to roll out a lot of things ourselves. So token caching, session management, authenticating users, managing the ID and access tokens. It's a lot of boilerplate code that you have to write. So from my perspective, if you can use our libraries, it's brilliant. If you don't want to use our libraries, you can also use any OpenID Connect compliant libraries to build your solution. So if you're coming with a project that you built 5 years ago and that has OpenID Connect libraries or third-party libraries like Passport for Node, you don't have to rip it apart. You just use the same library, you just point it to the OpenID Connect compliant endpoints that we have, and off you go. So this is it. I've done my demo.